Good evening and welcome to the Channel Studios here in London with your international news around the world in 5. The Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has announced his resignation for health reasons, saying he didn't want his illness to get in the way of his decision-making. The 65-year-old has suffered for many years from ulcerative colitis and inflammatory bowel disease, but he has said his condition has worsened recently. Abe apologized to the Japanese people for failing to complete his term in office. Last year, he became Japan's longest-serving prime minister. His current period in office began in 2012. He will remain in his post until a successor is chosen. US President Donald Trump has warned his Democratic challenger Joe Biden will demolish the American dream if he wins the White House in November.
This election will decide.
Speaking on the final night of the Republican convention, the president depicted his opponent as the destroyer of American greatness. He said the Democrats would unleash violent anarchists upon US cities. Biden currently holds a steady single-digit lead in opinion polls ahead of the 10-week sprint to Election Day, which starts on November the 3rd.
Joe Biden is not a savior of America's soul. He is the destroyer of America's jobs, and if given the chance, he will be the destroyer of American greatness.
Meanwhile, anti-Trump demonstrators gathered outside the White House, blowing air horns and whistles with the hopes of being overheard during Trump's speech. In a reminder of the country's divisions, attendees could hear the protesters sounding horns as he spoke, a noise that occasionally was audible on the live broadcast. At least 6 people have been killed as Hurricane Laura battered the US state of Louisiana. Winds of up to 240 kilometers an hour have caused severe damage with power cuts to more than 500,000 homes and a chemical fire from an industrial plant. But the feared 6-meter storm surge was avoided as the state's largest hurricane tracked further east. Laura has now been downgraded to a tropical storm status. 3 people, including a 4-year-old boy, have been killed by falling trees after a storm lashed the Australian state of Victoria.
That's what we're talking about.
Gusts of up to 158 kilometres an hour have been recorded, causing widespread damage and knocking out power to 95,000 homes. The deaths happened in suburbs across the state capital, Melbourne, a city already struggling from a COVID outbreak. Residents in 88 suburbs have been warned that the storm has contaminated drinking water. European countries have continued to tighten rules amid recent coronavirus outbreaks. In France, rules requiring Parisians to wear masks have come into force as the country has reported over 6,000 new cases, the highest since the peak of the outbreak. Meanwhile, Germans have been told not to travel to high-risk countries and regions as a top state official has said that corona is fully back in Germany. In Spain, children as young as 6 will now have to wear face coverings in schools. Meanwhile, the South Korean government has taken the unprecedented step of imposing restrictions on eateries in the capital in a bid to curb the spread of COVID-19. Churches, nightclubs and most schools in the capital are already closed and masks are mandatory in public places. Egyptian security forces have arrested a top leader of the outlawed Muslim Brotherhood group. The fugitive Mahmoud Ezzat was hiding in an apartment in eastern Cairo. That's according to a statement by the Interior Ministry. The arrest is the latest blow to Egypt's oldest and most organised Islamist movement, which has been crushed in a sweeping crackdown since it was forced from power 7 years ago. The British street artist Banksy has financed a boat to rescue refugees attempting to reach Europe from northern Africa. The ship has already rescued 89 people so far, that's according to members of the German NGO Sea-Watch. The migrants are still on board and the Louise Michel boat is speaking with authorities to find a safe port for disembarkation. And finally, the show must go on, as was the case at the World Tango Championships in Buenos Aires, moving online in keeping with social distancing norms. The championship is part of Buenos Aires' Tango Festival, which normally takes place in the capital's Milongas. But this year, its entire platform has moved online with tutorials and special performances available to celebrate the passionate dance to dance. And that's your international news around the world in 5. Now back to the Channel Studios in Lagos.